Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Warcraft lore video. Now, Illidan getting angry and shattering that annoying talking chandelier really got me thinking about the direction they could take some of the future lore. Now, to be clear, this video is not really about the next expansion, it's not necessarily about a particular expansion, it's more just about the theme of us fighting the light, even if it's in a smaller context such as a patch like Ulduar or the throne of the Thunder King. It might seem, on the face of it, really strange that we would end up fighting the light, but you might actually be surprised here. Blizzard have been dropping a crazy amount of hints, including some pretty major ones, in the 1000 Years of War audiobook that they recently released, and that's something that I'm betting most people haven't actually listened to. This is going to be one of those videos, though, that kind of comes together towards the end, so you will have to bear with me for a little bit as we go through everything in the right order. But trust me, though, this is pretty cool. First, let's talk about the problem that Blizzard has. We are great at killing stuff. In fact, we're risking a situation where we've ran out of things to kill apart from each other. Bar Shara, all of the original Warcraft RTS villains have been dealt with, and that's even with Blizzard bringing people back from the dead, pulling an expansion out of nowhere, and then having us time travel back to kill people that had already died. Again. The Legion expansion was always meant to be the end of the Legion, at least for now, and as we've talked about before, that really just leaves us with Ishara, who is under N'Zoth's thumb, N'Zoth himself, who of course is aligned with the Void Lords, and then I suppose the Void Lords themselves. And I don't mean the Warlock Void Lords, I mean the big spooky magic cosmic horror ones. Literally all of the current main villain themes are the same thing, they're void. This presents a problem for Blizzard when it comes to making the different expansions actually feel unique and different from each other. Essentially, we need to fight something that feels different from the Void, even if it is in the form of, just a single fresh feeling raid tier inside an expansion that otherwise is Void themed. Now, while a MOP or a WoD style wildcard is always possible, do remember that since Warlords, Blizzard have been pushing for interlinked narratives that lead in from expansion to expansion. At least they've said as much in interviews. Which, of course, brings me on to the topic of the light. So the first thing we have to do is talk about what light and void actually are, because their descriptions are mostly done outside of the game in things like Chronicle and the Aleria and Turalian audiobook. So here goes. Void and light are not sentient things that have intention. They are fundamental forces of the universe. The Warcraft version of the Big Bang, which led to things like, everything essentially being created, that was a clash between the light and the void. There is no morality to them, just that one of them, the void, can be a bit more corrupting and maddening. That doesn't make it evil, though. A black hole is terribly destructive and consuming, but it's not evil, it just is what it is. I almost see Light and Void's creation by Blizzard being kind of inspired by things like matter, antimatter, dark energy, all of that stuff, mixed in with the Force from Star Wars, but we'll see this Force analogy a little bit later. But basically, that's what Light and Void are. Now, you've probably noticed something, that footage is absolutely stunning. Well, if you want to see more, check out the Lost Codex on YouTube. They take a completely different approach to lore that's really unique, visually stunning. The amount of work these guys put into a single video is absolutely staggering, and I would love it if you checked out their channel. Let them know that I sent you. There will be links in the description. They've got a full video on the origins of the cosmos, and it's seriously fantastic. Okay, let's jump into the morals that Blizzard have been placing on those who wield light and void in World of Warcraft, especially with how they have been getting a bit more grey recently. But here's what's important about all that light and void stuff. From the forces of light and void, beings emerged. This means that those beings can have morality, so therefore they can be good or evil. Light and void are just forces to be wielded, be it for good or ill. Of course, most void-leaning beings have been evil, and most light-leaning beings have been good. So us thinking that light is good and void is bad, that is more a reflection on the wielders of those forces rather than the forces themselves. They are just fundamental things that they don't think, they don't have intention, they just are. Now, there are plenty of places where you can see the light being used for complete evil. The Scarlet Crusaders are able to use the light to kill innocent peasants. Their strong belief and connection to the light allows them to wield it, and what they do with that power is up to them, and that's where the morals come in. I think you can kind of see where I'm going with this one. Looking into more recent times, the Naru Prime Zira attempted to purify Illidan. What's more important though is she didn't consult him about it first, she just went ahead and zapped him. This did not end very well for her, as we saw in that cinematic, and it leads us into a very important theme. The light comes with the condition of absolute obedience, just like how wielders of the light are normally, members of strict, oppressive orders. The Naru demand absolute obedience. This is seen in the 1,000 Years of War audiobook. According to it, the light forces will pretty much bring peace under the condition of you being absolutely obedient to it. When Illyria tries to learn more about the Void, Zira was furious, and later on, when she used it, Zira imprisoned Illyria, which wasn't a very nice thing to do. The general plot arc here in relation to Zira is one of characters submitting to her absolutely and receiving power in return. None of that sounds good, does it? Now, Xal'atath, who of course is not to be trusted, does say this.
The light would have your kind remain obedient and stagnant. I offer the gifts of freedom and strength.
Which does kind of line up with what we see friendly characters say about the light as well. Now, as an aside, that very much seems like the difference between the Jedi and the Sith in Star Wars. When you think about the Jedi, as much as the Order, you think, oh, they're the good side, they're very, very strange. Obedience is a big thing, they just have a bunch of very odd things going on with them. But speaking of ideas not being that original, this is a theme the Blizzard have explored heavily before. In Diablo 3, the Angels are not the good guys. Tyrael, in rejecting the other Angels, is an ally of the player character and therefore a good guy. The general theme of them in Diablo is one of the absolute order and obedience, with harsh punishments for anyone who steps out of line. And indeed, the origin of the Diablo 3 humans is basically that a demon and an angel ran off with each other and had kids. Or if you were to bring it into WoW terms, shadow and light. As Illyria says,
without the light, there is no shadow.
And vice versa. Blizzard, of course, have no problem borrowing from themselves, which is why I bring this up. After all, Illidan is essentially Kerrigan, but with a bit of a plot twist in 7.3. Now, we've talked about the light being bad, so let's talk about the void being good. Illyria has been able to use it to fight demons many different times, not just in the story we all played through in 7.3, but also in the audiobook, where she teams up with Locust Walker, they get out of a few sticky situations, including one on Niskara, and in the process she leaves her bow behind for marksmanship hunters to later find in their artifact quest. It seems as if the Void is just very, very powerful and therefore inherently corrupting, a bit like the dark side of the Force. Think about it, are various addictive IRL drugs evil? No, they're just chemicals, they've got no morality. The morality comes in when people get involved. Void seems to me to be just like that, based on my interpretation of Blizzard's lore. Now, the struggle between Light and Void seems like an almost fundamental part of the universe, and it seems to go really far back. Xal'atath, who of course is not to be trusted, does have a few interesting quotes on this.
Do the Naru speak of the eternal conflict? That the entire history of your world is but a fraction of the time that has passed? Of those that came before the Draenei? No?
So it very much seems like this is a cyclical thing that just keeps on happening and happening, with countless civilizations being destroyed over this struggle between the forces of light and void. As for the Naru, well, she's got this to say about them.
I know the Naru consider us horrors to be resisted. We do not share this view. They are merely beloved brethren that lost the true path. They will return to their masters in time.
So a reasonable reading of this seems to be that they're a duality, which makes sense given the cosmic backstory that we talked about. And indeed with Illyria in the audiobook, when she pulled Turalyon through a void portal to safety, it caused him great pain because by that time he had been light forged by Zira. Now here's the thing, by this stage in the video I think we've established enough of this lore that we can kind of move on to a bit more of the interesting speculation stuff, especially with Elune. This might be a bit of a mind blow, but it's pretty cool. So, I'm going to cover, Elune first. It is revealed in Legion that Khadgar thinks Elune created Zira and the other Prime Naru. Now this is very interesting, because Xal'atath, who remember, is not to be trusted, has this to say about Elune.
My mistake. It seems the upstart goddess still holds sway here. Oh well.
This happens right after the Sisters of the Moon encounter, and it said once you manage to survive the 30% HP per second debuff that's placed upon you whenever you sort of click a dialogue option. Upstart Goddess, though. Xalatath is almost implying a degree of familiarity. Now, if Elune created the Naru, as Khadgar thinks, and the Naru along with lost brethrens of Xalatath's kind, as Xalatath says, then it implies that Elune is some sort of rebel to the Void. Perhaps a Void Lord who has swapped sides and then created the Naru. After all, if you think about the Naru, they can go from light to void. Now, this would make sense, if, say, Elune, like the Void Lord, struggles to take physical form in our world, which of course is matched by our in-game representation. Now, considering that we just killed what might be the last of the Prime Naru, well, that really makes things interesting. It opens up Elune and other light-aligned forces as major plot points for Blizzard to explore in the game's future. Now, if Elune was aligned to Order, which does make sense that, she created the Naru, but it actually makes a lot of sense that she would have paid special attention to Azeroth, given how Azeroth is basically the most powerful Titan world soul in existence, and it is the ultimate goal of her enemy, the Void Lords, which could explain why all the wild gods and all those were supposedly created by Elune to protect our planet. So this opens up Elune as a potential new ally or adversary. Further to that, we could also have light-themed enemies who, much like the Angels of Diablo 3 or the Scarlet Crusade of World of Warcraft, think that we are, tainted with the Void and that we must be eradicated. As you can see, something like this could make for a hell of a raid tier, perhaps, fighting off a fringe light-aligned group, or it could even make for an entire expansion theme if it was focused around Elune. Or, and perhaps, more likely, this is just something that will be present and woven through the evolving story of the game. But hey, an expansion on the moon fighting Elune, that would be a bit, fuck it, we're already going to far-off planets and stuff, why the hell not? But still, I do this video mainly because I think that while the World of Warcraft storyline in-game is often very shaky and uneven, the lore is kind of cool. It's, it's like an amalgamation of sort of puzzle pieces from other IPs that they normally put together in a pretty interesting way, so that's why it's kind of fun to discuss. Plus, often it can lead to an expansion, so it is kind of interesting. But hey, that's it for this video. So, what do you think about the light? What do you think the further, implications of that Illidan cinematic are? I'm pretty keen to hear what you think, but that's it for the video. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.